terms of just the sheer age of the assets and also the knock-on effect. I think it was 2 years ago in the news that the actual main chamber of Westminster essentially looked like a shower where all the MPs were, because it was all flooded unexpectedly. And I imagine that a lot of the assets in that building are quite sort of devolved now and ready to sort of at breaking point. So that's really interesting. That's really great. I've just checked in with our organisers. Unfortunately, there's still the technical issue ongoing, so we're just going to have to wait. Oh, I spoke too soon.
Hello, I'm Andy Scholes. I'm the Project Manager and Construction Manager here at Liverpool Street Crossrail Station. Attracted into rail goes all the way back to when I first decided to study civil engineering at university. One of the main things I did was look at the student guidebook and pick careers from the student guidebook, and civil engineering was one of them. And then when I went to uni at Liverpool John Moores, I then did civil engineering, of which one of the modules was railways, and I ended up building a section of tunnel in a lab, shoveling 21 tons of sand in and putting sensors onto this rail, pieces of rail, and testing it, and I ended up meeting the London Underground infrastructure engineer, Mike Gallatley, and we got talking about railways and what you wanted to do. And I always said I would never come to London, and the project went really well, and we sent the findings to LU just as an aside. But we then did a high-speed rail project for the Northwest, where we did a lot of design work and stuff, and so I got quite involved with it. And then I got the opportunity to actually visit London Underground on sort of like a summer break. And came down to London, met one of the infrastructure protection engineers for London Underground, and went for a walk. Went for a walk down from Queen's Park station, down the tunnel on the Bakerloo line, and from then on it was, this is interesting, this is good, this. And then I sort of started hatching a sort of 50-year plan in my head as to what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. So from that initial look in the student guidebook, I sort of plotted the civil engineering element of it, and then sort of fell into railways from the projects that we did at uni. Most about my current job. My current job is Project Manager and Construction Manager here at Liverpool Street Station. This is one of the finest stations on Crossrail, and when it opens on the Elizabeth line later on, it's going to be awesome. It is just walking through here and seeing the cathedral-like state of the station. It is just brilliant. I've worked at Crossrail for about 11 years. On and off, I've had a couple of year stint at Gatwick Airport, and I've come back as the project manager here to help get Liverpool Street over the line. But what I enjoy most about it is actually just seeing it finished. I'm working at Farringdon. I did a visit to there yesterday as well, and seeing how finished that is as well. It is just awesome. When people come into the station, we're quite focused now on the minutiae of detail to get it over the line. But when people actually walk into the place, they get the sense of feeling of how brilliant this railway actually is. There's a lot of challenging parts now. We're at the 95% complete, and that last 5% getting it over the line is the most challenging. It's all the little bitty things that we've put off that we just need to get sorted now is actually quite challenging. A lot of the difficult things, a lot of the difficult finishes that we've pushed to the end of the list now needs to be addressed. We need to get all the testing and commissioning done and actually make sure it works. So getting it safe, operable, maintainable and fit for purpose is the challenging bit that keeps us going on a day-to-day basis, and literally just getting finished, getting all the final bits signed off, getting all the assurance in place, and being available to actually ready to hand this magnificent railway over to London Underground. Well, career in railway is fantastic. It is such a diverse, complex, enthralling, magnificent industry to get into, because there's so much that you can do. I started with London Underground way back in 1998. And working from London Underground through the changes that happened in London Underground, out to other consultancies, moving over to Bechtel, coming down to Crossrail, and working here. There's just so much that you can do, and there's so many great people in the railway industry that you can work with to actually keep London moving, to actually change the focus of a city. One of my focuses when I first started was to get into step-free access, making sure that all the railway is DDA, Disability Discrimination Act compliant, making sure people can get on and off the trains easily, and that kind of work that people do in order to make some of these stations accessible is brilliant. And here on the Elizabeth line, all our stations are accessible, so we've come so far in such a short space of time, but there's still so much more work people can do. So getting into that aspect of it is really good. Really getting to know people, making sure you know who you're dealing with, and making sure you know what you're trying to achieve on a daily basis. I've got quite a large team here at Liverpool Street, and they're brilliant. The engineers have got a grip on all the technical detail. We've got our planner who's got a grip on the programme. We've got our commercial manager who's got all the commercial detail to hand. And me as project manager just needs to make sure that all that is moving in the right direction, making sure we're actually signing things off where there's issues to be dealt with, actually forcing the issue to conclusion and getting it concluded in order that we can actually hand over the station. But diplomacy is one, not getting phased by what's actually happening. This is a multi-million-pound station and a multi-billion-pound railway, and making sure that you actually do the best that you can actually do in the constraints that we've got. And for me, mine was pretty much a traditional route, but there's many different ways you can go through the educational route to get to being a PM. And the key thing is actually just doing your best. What do you want to do? What do you want to get out of it? And to actually carry on. It's not about getting all your exams done and getting all the A's, B's, C's and whatever it is now getting done, but it's actually having that desire to deliver infrastructure. And actually that desire to get out there and actually do practical work and to make it work. There's many different ways you can do things, and there's many different designers and experts out there who can actually help you design, build, maintain, operate, construct infrastructure that means that you as an individual, if you've got that skill, you can bring that to the table, but there's many different skills that you can bring to the party in order to create this wonderful infrastructure. If I was mentoring people in the industry now, is to actually be positive, be very clear on what you want to do. There is nobody that can say that you can't do something. I did a talk to the Angela Ruskin University a couple of years ago, and I do a presentation where I show my educational route, my grades, and ask people what grades I got, A-levels, and my A-levels, I won't do it on camera what they actually were, but they got me to where I wanted to do. They got me the civil engineering degree, and that's what got me into the railway industry. But there was a lady there who didn't get the grades that she wanted, and she was contemplating actually leaving and finding something else to do. And when she seen my grades, and she went, really, I'm going to try again. I'm going to have one more go at getting the grade that I need in order to be able to do the course that I want in order to get into business management, railway management, and that kind of thing. And it was actually quite nice to be able to say, if that's what you want to do, you need to work at it. No one's going to give it to you. No one's going to deliver it to you on a plate, but what you need to do is actually be very clear on what you want to do and how you want to do it, and then work out a way to do it. So I came the very much traditional route by going to university, but there's BTECs, there's apprenticeships. I've met some fantastic apprentices, and they will go far. The traditional educational route wasn't for them, but the actual practical learning on the job aspect of the work really was, and they will go far, and they will literally be able to be commanders of the industry in times to come.
Fantastic. I don't know about everybody else, but I am insanely proud of that film. Mainly because I was on site when it was filmed, but also because I really enjoyed that day. It was great to go and look around and see what progress has been made. We've got a couple of questions for you, Andy. First
Mhm.
off, the first question I've got is, how long did it take you to feel sort of comfortable and confident in your role as a project manager at Crossrail? What was it that made you get to that point of going, yeah, this is me, I've arrived, I'm a project manager and I'm doing my thing?
The being project manager and construction manager came last year when I moved back. So I did about 10, 11 years as site manager down at Farringdon. And then I went away for about 18 months down to Gatwick. And then I was asked if I would like to come back and be the construction manager down at Liverpool Street. And I just jumped at the chance to come back. And then because there was changes going on at Liverpool Street and Crossrail as they were preparing to hand over to London Underground, I was then asked if I would babysit Liverpool Street Station. Would I look after the whole thing, become the PM, project manager and construction manager over the summer of last year. And it was, as you heard in the film, the team that were down there are brilliant. And it was actually a pleasure. And I hadn't had a brilliant time down at Gatwick with one thing and another, but actually coming back and being the project manager, it was fun. It was actually getting to the point where you could sign things off and do things. But that was part of 11 years worth of work and hard work, calling up contacts that I knew from Farringdon, because the stations being next door to each other were a lot of the same stakeholders, and a lot of my work was with stakeholders, and actually being able to use those contacts again and dealing with the team that were there that knew what was going on was just brilliant. So whilst the video that you've seen, very well edited together, it was great doing. So if it does show a bit of confidence, it is down to hard work and actually having the time to actually learn what you're doing.
Brilliant. The next question I've got, I think, is someone who might have LinkedIn'd you. What advice would you give someone who wants to move into project management from an engineering background like you have?
What advice
do we have a
getting?
LinkedIn maestro?
A LinkedIn maestro. LinkedIn it's quite an interesting beast. There was a guy LinkedIn me the other day who I'd known from Crossrail, or we'd met at some point in some meetings. He then had spoke to one of my current bosses, and we ended up having a meeting last week. So someone who I wasn't sure I knew, but we'd been in meetings together. It was quite strange. But actually, advice for becoming a project manager. Again, in the video, it's like I've been a project manager before when I was down at London Underground, and had an absolutely blast of a time. The enjoyment that you get from actually stepping out and actually working out how to deliver projects and deliver them to a high quality, on time, on budget, it is actually part of the skill of understanding and knowing what you're doing, and learning on the job as well. Actually learning from a lot of people. I've worked with some excellent senior PMs and some APMs as well, some assistant project managers, and actually learning from them and bringing their skills in to actually help deliver the project is actually quite important. Being able to learn off other people, really. And gaining that advice and experience by doing, but by listening.
Absolutely. Okay. And then the last one, I'm not sure if you'll be allowed to answer, is
How much do you earn?
no, No, it's did you ever have an oh no moment that made you second guess yourself? And if so, how did you deal with it and overcome that oh no moment?
Well, it's funny you should ask. So whoever asked that question, you've obviously been reading my mind. Now, when this whole presentation was put together, and the text went out, so when this was promoted, this Q&A session, it went out, and I've been chuckling about it ever since, about being a veteran. Now, I've had two sort of or no moments that have all come from young rail professional, that I'll go with this story, then I'll go back into my oh no. So many years ago, working at Farringdon, I had an oh no moment that was, I was going to a young rail professional meeting, and something came up, and I couldn't go for whatever reason. And then my boss asked me where was I going, and I said, oh, a young rail professional meeting. And she stood up and she went, you're now an old person. You're not a young rail professional. And it's like, with all these years of experience that you've got, how dare you be going to a young rail professional? And that was the first sort of oh no. And then when we promoted this event, it came up as London Underground veteran. Now I read that, I chuckled, and then I actually went onto LinkedIn, and put it out there and said, what constitutes a veteran? And one of the senior project managers who I'd worked with at Bechtel actually linked in me and messaged me, and he said, Andy, a veteran is someone who has had an oh no moment, an oh crap moment, is how he put it. And I stopped and thought, and I actually looked back to my time at London Underground, and the biggest oh no moment was when I had to actually cancel an entire weekend's possession work up on the Metropolitan line. So we were due to go out and do some serious civil engineering. We were doing drainage in the 6th, so we were digging up the railway up at Rickmansworth at Chorleywood, and I put this together. I'd worked lots of hours, and my topping out of hours was like 97 hours in a week. I'd ended up doing days, nights, and yes, I take the point of working time directive and all this, but we'd got so engrossed in the work that we were doing, I had to go out at night to be able to make sure the possession was set up. We'd set the possession up, and we had all the different disciplines involved in the possession, and we wrote a possession plan. Now, at that time, this was before the public-private partnership. This was before the London Underground was split up, and it was quite a difficult time because civils were starting to do a lot more work on track. And as the drainage project manager, this was a job that had been done by track. It had been taken off the track team and given to the civils team, and we were actually delivering this on behalf of the track team. So civils didn't close the railway. It was not a done thing. And we'd spent a lot of time and effort, and there was all sorts of problems with the possession setup, the protection staff, and how we actually we're going to operate the possession, right up to the point where Friday night you go down to South Kensington to meet your possession master in order to take the railway. At that point, the protection staff withdrew their protection support, so I didn't have anybody with which to take a possession. And I had to phone the line controller and tell him that we would not be taking the railway that day or that weekend and doing any work on it whatsoever. As you can understand, having 150 people sitting waiting in vans to be told to just go home.
I can imagine that went down really well.
It was quite a difficult weekend. I went out on track with one of the possession staff that I had, one of the duty managers, and I picked up a bit of ballast and I threw it, and that was the only piece of ballast that moved the entire weekend. We had the railway shut from Harrow on the Hill to Rickmansworth, up to Amersham actually. We had closed. We had all these people stood down. We had materials on trains. I had engineers' trains parked up in Ruislip that couldn't come out. They were full of materials.
Did that impact the Chiltern Railway running as well then, on that bit of section of line from Amersham? Because the Chiltern Railway runs, yeah. Oh wow, that was very expensive then.
Yes, it was very expensive weekend. I think to probably the tune of probably about £250,000 worth of weekend. And I think I could safely say I was broken at that point. So
Yeah.
Friday
It
night,
must have been so
phone
stressful.
all the directors, London Underground, tell them we are not taking the possession in for whatever reason. And okay, noted. All calls were made over that night. I then went home, went to bed, put in a really crap awful weekend for it. For my boss later on the Saturday, he said, right, come in on Monday morning. We've got to go and see the safety director. And it was one of those, okay, so got to Monday morning. I left the house. I essentially broke down in tears, effectively, as I left the house. I then went back in the house, calmed myself down, and everything else. And it was just a really, really difficult time after working all that time and putting all this together and sweating cobs to get it out there, and everything else. It was I felt broken at the time. I then went into work, met up with my boss, went to see the health and safety director, who went, very interesting, Andy, very interesting weekend. And I'm like, yeah, all right, yeah. What did I do wrong? And everything else. Said, civils can't take possessions. I'm like, what? It was one of those where it was like the civils team in the railway safety book that London Underground used to operate. There was no rules with which a civils team could take a possession. And the fact that I'd taken a possession, he said, I'm amazed that you managed to get this signed off, and to the point where you switched the railway off and had buses running and had all these people standing up when your possession plan was technically wrong. It had been signed off by 7 different department heads, and it was still wrong.
Wow.
And that led to huge changes in the possession management at London Underground, to the point where a whole new team came in to actually write possession plans and set them up and do them, and a whole department sprung out of this one incident. So when we talk about the oh no moments, and looking back at how this was actually presented as a veteran, and the comment that came out, I actually stopped and thought about this last week, and getting to the point where we hadn't run a railway, but the amount of learning that I got from that one incident, it was a multitude of other incidents that was leading up to the point where there could have been real problems. If I'd have carried on, that possession was wrong, and the impact of taking that possession incorrectly could have had serious consequences.
Absolutely.
Now, everybody had signed it off, but actually understanding that the system was broken and being able to get more people involved in that was actually quite a big oh no moment for me, and that was sort of, as I say, career defining.
That's a big deal, especially considering that your oh no moment has even having your oh no moment has then instilled positive change to a process. So that's incredible. I've got 3 more questions that I just want to whiz through quickly because we're running short on time.
Sorry, I keep blathering.
That's okay, it's all right. One of them is, what skills do you think the railway will need in the next 10 years or so, from the people coming up the ranks to backfill where you're jumping onto these fantastic projects next?
Diplomacy, stakeholder engagement is one of the key skills. If you don't understand your stakeholders, and they could be many, then there is little point going on with it. You cannot impose your projects on people. You need to do it by consensus. Now, people will not necessarily agree with you, but actually working with your stakeholders to understand the projects and to get them out there is actually quite key. And that's a diplomatic skill, and being able to listen as opposed to try and impose your will on people.
I would completely agree with you there. The next one is, what has been your favourite project that you've worked on so far, and why, excluding your current, because it's your job and you have to say it's your favourite?
I have to say it's my favourite. I have to say Farringdon. Farringdon was just awesome. To see Farringdon handed over it was about a week or two ago now, actually handed over to London Underground. That was just amazing. The fact that I couldn't have been there on that day, I phoned my colleague Chris Salmidi the day after, and he'd been running around all night handing it over. But I remember the day very clearly when we actually took the first buildings at Farringdon Station on the East Ticket Hall, when Thameslink was being built, putting the first shovel in the ground, to the absolutely amazing team that we worked with from BFK through London Underground, through Crossrail, through Bechtel. Absolutely awesome. And for a project like that, and seeing it handed over, and then being the PM for Liverpool Street, Crossrail has to be my favourite.
Okay, and then our final question, which is the one that we'll be closing with. Could you sum up your experience in the rail industry in just 3 words?
Poof, 3 words. In 3 words, it's exceptional. Is one. It is engaging, and partnerships as well. I think they would be my 3 words that I would say. Partnerships, because actually working with your stakeholders and creating the partnerships in order to get your projects going is brilliant. And there's the number of different stakeholders involved in railway projects, from the members of the public to the train operating companies, to the maintainers, to the sponsors, and working through all those different stakeholders with all the engineers and all the disciplines as well, is, and I think probably awesome, I'd put on the end of it as well.
Okay, that was definitely more than 3 words. You're not playing fast.
I know. They were my 3 main words that I could think of, but as you could probably tell, I am extremely enthused by railways. The fact that I'm not in railways now for my current job is just by circumstance. But everybody who's listening, and especially the young rail professionals coming out, there is just so much work to do, and so much good work that you can actually get in and involved. And one of my pieces was about step-free access. The most expensive lift I put in was like £16.9 million, and it went 3 meters. And that are the kind of rail projects that you can get involved with, that are technically complex, but would mean so much to people who can't actually get on and off trains.
Absolutely. I mean, if things were easy, they wouldn't be worth doing, would they? So
exactly.
That's part of the love
Definitely.
of the railway and the challenge that it offers. Well, thank you so much for giving us more of your time this evening. Thank you to everyone who attended. And if you'd like to see this again, it will be uploaded to our website and YouTube channel. So thank you all for attending. Good night.
Cheers, Bonnie. Thanks very much.